is December 8th, 2024, and Bashar al-Assad is no longer the president of Syria, according to reports noting that he has left the country. This, as the rebranded version of al-Qaeda, is just a couple of weeks into its offensive that has swept across the country and even entered Damascus. Now we're looking at what comes next for Syria. Are they going to form some sort of transitional government? What is that going to look like with all of the different warring factions in the country, as Israel is already getting its piece by expanding its illegal occupation of Syria, ramping up its strikes, targeting what remains of the Syrian government and their military, and more. We got into all of the latest in a very special interview. I know that many of you who follow my channel also follow Kevork Almassian of Syriana Analysis. This was actually his first interview after the fall of Assad. We took a look at what this means for the country and also what this means for the entire region. So without further ado, let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Kevork Almassian, a geopolitical analyst and host of Syriana Analysis. Kevork, thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
With pleasure. It's a pleasure to share my perspective about what's happening in Syria now.
Oh, well, it's great to have you on the show, especially right now. I know that we're having this conversation as we now know that Bashar al-Assad is no longer the president of Syria and has left the country. And that's according to not just anonymous officials, but also notably a statement from the Russian Foreign Ministry, which said in the statement that he chose a peaceful transition of power. Now, I was incredibly shocked by this news, right? Everything that Syria has gone through in the last 13 years, it has been shocking to watch this rebranded version of al-Qaeda sweep to, I guess, a form of power and to watch Syrian troops stand down. Will you start by giving me your reaction to the latest?
So when the HTS started the offensive on Aleppo, for me, it was quite clear that the Syrian army strength was enough to repel such attacks. And I have been reporting about it that the Jolani army will attack on Aleppo way before the attack happened. So it was anticipated. However, the nature of the attack and the way the Syrian army retreated, it gave us two impressions. The first one was the attack was very sophisticated and it had multifaceted strategies and military tactics in terms of the military equipment, but also the jamming, technological jamming, the drones that were used against the Syrian army positions. So we got the impression that the army was overwhelmed and they had to redeploy and retreat from Aleppo to northern Hama. And it also, the attitude of the Syrian army gave us again an impression that they want to defend Hama because this was the red line that they have set up. And then a decision has been made on a higher level in the Syrian army, probably by the president himself, that they have to retreat to Homs. And the people, those who understand Syria well, we knew that if Homs falls, Assad will be gone in a matter of few days maximum. Because Homs is the city which connects the different governorates of Syria together. It has different intersections there. And also it's the city which connects Damascus to the coastal area, from which also Syria imports its energy needs through Iran. So without an energy, you cannot also operate your military, you're done. So on the second and the third day of this war in Homs, another decision has been given for the army to retreat without fighting. So from the city, the military received orders to retreat and the militants occupied the city and they called it liberated. And they started moving to Damascus, and also from the south, from Daraa, the other militants also started moving to Damascus without any resistance. So they were basically walking on feet and on some pickup trucks, and they were going to Damascus without resistance. And the government said and alleged that they have to regroup around Damascus, and Damascus is protected. But then when the militants arrived to the, let's say, the suburbs of Damascus, another decision has been given to the Syrian army to, again, pull down their arms, dress civilian clothing, basically, and just give up. So this is a clear indication that there was a deal under the table, and the Syrian army is not fighting by orders of higher level, not because in the press and some of the pundits say that the Syrian army was not willing to fight, and if they are not willing to fight, then why would the allies come and also support the Syrian government? But that's not the case. The Syrian army was fighting in Homs and in Hama in the suburbs, and they were determined to push back. But when the decision was made, the army obeys the superior decision and they retreated. So this was clear indication that Assad made a deal with regional and international powers, probably during his last visit to Moscow, which was not the last Friday, but the previous Friday, when he met with President Putin secretly in an unannounced visit. Probably there was something that has been cooked between Syria and Russia Russia probably told Assad that it's time for a compromise and a deal, and we will secure and guarantee the unity of Syria or the sovereignty with our allies, and the allies are Turkey, Russia, the Arabic countries, but now we have also Israel intervening in this conflict. I think what happened was shocking to many, many Syrians, that the way that the cities were given up basically to the militants, especially for the people who supported Assad, and they believed that the army will defend them, but then the militants swept into the cities without any resistance. So this was a major shock factor for the people who support Assad. And now they see this as like giving up on the cause or treasonous act by Assad himself, especially if the reports are accurate that he left the country, and something that Lavrov also, as you mentioned, confirmed, that he's outside of Syria. And this is not the conclusion, I believe, that many, many Syrians wanted for. However, we have now a new reality, a new status quo that people have to respect and participate in this transition of power into a new Syria. Hopefully that would be, as people wish, democratic Syria. But at the same time, you follow also me for a long time, Rachel. My major concern from this foreign-backed insurgency was that Syria will lose its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and these militants are basically, without the outside support, they cannot really proceed and continue and advance in Syria. And now that they occupy Damascus and the rest of the cities, the amount of, let's say, revengeful acts from them is very minimum. They haven't killed, let's say, senior officials or journalists or people who were supporting the government. But I still believe that due to the foreign funding of these groups, any sort of future government cannot really be expected to be fully independent, especially if Syria wants to preserve its role in the region as a power which can have a resistance role against the US hegemony. I think that with Assad leaving power, Syria will definitely become a pro-American state. And this also means the end of what is called the axis of resistance in the region.
Yeah, and I know it's just, anyways, going back to that, the shock there, right, and how we led up to this point. And as you noted there, I mean, there's so much that Syria has gone through over the years. It's not as if everything was fine and this just happened overnight. You've had years of sanctions, years of various agreements. And I did think it was interesting too, going back to the question of kind of, was there a deal made of some sort? And in the last 2 weeks, we've seen the rise of this latest edition of Al-Qaeda called HTS that spread outside of Idlib, and its leader, Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani. And all of a sudden, they're trying to rebrand themselves as diversity friendly and moderate. And you've got the US openly attacking Iraqi militias. You've got Israel also carrying out a number of strikes, continuing to do so today, further expanding their illegal occupation of Syria, their invasion into the country. And now that Jolani is at the forefront of this kind of transitional government that they're talking about forming, I just can't see a way in which this is easy and we magically have some sort of new government that forms, given all of the different warring factions, given the fact that you have both Israel and Turkey that have interest in Syria, that want that land. You also have the US-backed Kurds. So how do you see kind of the different factions and where Syria stands today in this new reality?
If the Syrian opposition groups are going to continue with the same mentality, which means that when they were in the exile and they formed different opposition political groups, and also on the ground they have formed different military groups, and everyone has a different allegiance to a different country because of the funding, then this is going to end up in a failure. So from my new position, let's say now I'm considered the opposition to the current to the current rule in Damascus. I will not do the same thing that they do, which is like trying to stop the wheel of let's say economic development in the country, or just trying to absurdly become an opposition just for the sake of being an opposition. And because nowadays the meaning of opposition has become also distorted. The opposition has to be patriotic and caring about the people and the country. And so if there is anything from my side that I could help, I will be there. But if we judge from the previous how they formed their opposition groups, both politically and militarily, I think Turkey will have its wing in the government, definitely. The Saudis will have their wing with the Emiratis in the government. The French will have their wing in the government. Americans will have their wing in the government, and Israel will have its wing in the government. At least these countries will definitely have their assets in the government. Therefore, we will see probably a government that is non-functional because of the conflict of interest of these powers. Therefore, my humble advice would be for the politicians who are going to build the new Syria is to try to detach themselves as much as possible from foreign funding and foreign leverage, because these countries do not really care about the Syrian people. They have their geopolitical interests in the country. And this is where I come from. My opposition to their revolution was that they are pursuing foreign interests in the country, basically Saudi, Qatari, Turkish, American, and Israeli. And I was correct. And you can see nowadays that all these powers are in Syria guiding these opposition groups to go to Damascus. Therefore, expecting Syria to stay independent and sovereign, it's, in my opinion, a wishful thinking. It is possible probably on the longer run, but maybe, sometimes I think about such events from historical perspective, and I say, maybe, just maybe, some people have to go through some experiences to learn from it and to get matured in order to understand how to build a state and a country and preserve its sovereignty. And if they don't do that, then they will perish. Any people around the world who cannot really become mature enough to build a state institution and keep its country sovereign, they will lose as a country and as a territorial integrity, like we see nowadays in Ukraine, for example, like we saw in Georgia, like we're seeing in Armenia. They're ceding territories or losing territories. This is a very plausible and possible scenario if the Syrian people and the Syrian oppositionists now who are in charge of the country, if they don't mature and learn quick how to manage state affairs, I think this could end up in a really bad way. I don't hope that. I will not work for that outcome because my intentions are very clear. I want for my people to live in dignity and have a better life, probably without sanctions, and having access to their natural resources and building state institutions, schools, education, development. So this is the area which I find myself having a mutual ground with them if they have the good intentions. But my warning for them is always the same. None of these countries supporting them have the best interests of the Syrian people in their heart.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think that's a great point. And that's also, I mean, the US loves to do it that way, right? They put all of these sanctions on a country. And then when the country does what they want, when a leader is overthrown and there's a change in government, then the US comes in and says, okay, we'll lift the sanctions. We'll give you plenty of foreign aid as long as you're acting the way that we want you to. And it just never is truly in the best interest of the people on the ground. Now, when it comes to kind of where the region goes from here, right? Kind of taking a step back and looking at how this has an effect on Palestine and on the ongoing Palestinian cause. I mean, we think of the fact that I know that there was a recent ceasefire deal made between Israel and Hezbollah just a couple of weeks ago. But Israel's eye has continued to be on Syria, continued to be on those supply lines and on the aid that Syria has provided to Hezbollah and to other members of the resistance. So how do you view the situation that the Palestinians are currently in? Is there any chance that Israel, I guess, backs off from Gaza in any way because now they've gotten what they wanted in Syria and they're turning their attention there?
Benjamin Netanyahu just posted a video from the Golan Heights, and he was celebrating the removal of Assad and says that finally a threat from our border is gone. I think we have to be honest with our respected audience and tell them the facts. The axis of resistance is going to crumble. It's going to disintegrate. And this has started in Gaza. Israel completely destroyed Gaza. There is no standing building there. So even though there are Palestinians living in this place, but they have basically committed a genocide because they have destroyed this Palestinian people as an ethnic group and a religious group in part or in whole. So the destruction of the Palestinian people in Gaza is not only about killing, because people really do not know the definition of genocide. The genocide is not to kill everyone in the Palestinians. If you kill them in part or in whole, meaning that you turn the place that they live in into a hell, a place where they can't live and continue having any future prospect, anything, any hope, you already committed the genocide. And if you had the intention of killing the people based on their ethnicity and religion, that's a genocide. And I think the Palestinian situation now is they are weaker than they used to be before October 7. So Hezbollah is also weaker than before October 7. Those are facts. And the assassination of the entire leadership of Hezbollah, including the Secretary General. Now, maybe people in Lebanon still denying the realities, and I understand, because psychologically it's difficult to accept this bitter reality, but there is going to be a chilling moment for them to realize that they have become like orphans, because Nasrallah for them was like a father figure, and he was the one who restored their dignity after the liberation of Lebanon in 2000 and 2006. And he was the one who created deterrence against Israel. And he was the one who went to Syria to fight against these terrorist groups in order to protect the borders of Lebanon. So with the killing of the entire leadership of Hezbollah, I truly believe that replacing the leadership, it's going to be a very, very hard mission. It's not impossible, but it's going to be extremely difficult. And history sometimes gives you a leader on a golden plate, and you have to appreciate it and enjoy it. But when you lose it, replacing him is going to be very difficult. Not all time great leaders come to some countries. And now that Syria has also crumbled, all the supply chains for Hezbollah will be cut. Definitely 100%. The Americans, the Turks, and the Israelis, Saudis, Emiratis, they're not going to allow for existence of any supply chains for Hezbollah in Syria, which means that Hezbollah will become a local player again instead of being a regional player in the region, having an access in Yemen, Iraq, and Syria. It's going to be local and only caring about the protection of their, let's say, group, the Shia Muslims in Lebanon. So their power will be degraded, and they will not have the capacity to go to war, basically, against Israel, because there is no longer a supply chain. I mean, if Syria is gone, Hezbollah will be cut from Iran, will be cut from Iraq, will be cut from the rest of the Middle East. So this basically means with weaker Palestine and weaker Hezbollah, and Syria disappeared from this equation, the axis of resistance is gone. And I know that some pundits say, no, it's possible. It's logically and geographically, it's not possible. And nobody should expect for HTS, which has lots of grievances with Hezbollah, to allow them to rearm and regroup and get any sort of assistance from Syria any longer. And therefore, this is something that I would like to mention because it's important. The Palestinians who are celebrating the occupation of Syria, which they call it liberation, I think they have to see this from the geopolitical lens And if they are honest with themselves and see it from a geopolitical lens, they will realize that their Palestine is in the worst shape possible. The Palestine cause is in the worst shape possible. And from now on, I think Israel will have the upper hand over the Palestinians, and they will not be able to continue armed struggle against. Maybe they don't want it. I'm not judging them if they don't want it, but if they want to continue armed struggle, this is going to be over. The struggle is only going to be peaceful or diplomatic, and I don't think that Israel really is afraid of diplomatic and political struggle, to be blunt.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me, as you were mentioning it there, the last point I wanted to make was the fact that, I see these people on social media and they are celebrating the downfall of Assad, right? They clearly didn't like him. They call him a dictator. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay, you don't have to like Assad. You don't have to agree with him. But have you not learned from Iraq, from Libya, from other places where there was one main government? And I know even in Syria, obviously going back to the warring factions, years of war that have harmed this country and obviously its people. But I just don't understand how people can celebrate today and act as if the Syrian people are in for a world of peace and democracy and freedom. What do you make finally of the reactions that you've seen, especially on social media from kind of around the world?
We are being told that history repeats itself, but that's not true. It's the people who do not learn from historical cycles and historical mistakes. I think people have the right to oppose Assad, and they have all the right to dislike his ruling system, and they have the right to direct their criticism. And I truly believe in that type of criticism. But allowing the US, Israel, Turkey, Saudi Arabia to become your sponsor to remove Assad from power. This is where I consider that this is no longer about an opposition against the government, but rather it's a foreign interference for the sake of converting Syria into a satellite state. And this was my major argument from the beginning. This is why I opposed this so-called revolution, because for me it was clear that no country funnels tens of billions of dollars into Syria to establish democracy. If there is no financial reasons or geopolitical reasons, you will not invest this much, right? But some people say that all these things are fantasies, despite the fact that they are documented with videos and documents and leaked emails and memos and everything we have in our hands nowadays, right? That's why I said maybe, just maybe, some people have to go through this misery and experience by itself in order to learn from it and mature. But the situation in Iraq and Libya and other places which lived such regime change wars and coups, basically, the situation is not better at the current moment. And in terms of the position of these countries geopolitically, their independence and their reach to the national resources, right? Therefore, I don't have the illusions nowadays to come and say that this situation is going to end up in a different way. I'm hopeful. I would really love to see that. But is it going to happen? I think that's a wishful thinking, and it needs lots of work, and lots of people have to fall into the same mistake over and over again. And if the regional countries were too, I don't think that they have the good intentions to let such mistakes pass by without capitalizing on it and using it for their best interests. Therefore, I think that Syria has become an arena now for Saudis and the Emiratis to have influence in the south, and the Israelis, and the Americans and the Turks from the north. And now Trump is going to come to power, and he will say, now I can withdraw my forces from Syria. And they strike a deal with Turkey, and they just divide Syria into different sphere of influence, or they would divide Syria geographically. I hope I'm wrong. Really, I really hope that I'm wrong. But this is how I see things at the current moment.
Yeah, certainly a lot at stake here all around. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to break down and to explain and give context to all of the latest here. Kevork Almassian, a geopolitical analyst and host of Syriana Analysis. Thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you so much for having me.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive deep dive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also catch Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Rachel Blevins. As always, thank you all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.